It was the kind of thing you're not supposed to remember. A throwaway insult, lobbed mid-argument like debris from a crumbling building. She half laughed when she said it, casual, sharp, and bored. You're just another mistake. Add it to the list. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her. Then I looked at the door behind her, briefly, like I was checking for the exit without moving. She went back to tapping at her phone, like we hadn't just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. No dramatic music. No final straw. Just the sound of casual disrespect, landing with surgical precision. We'd been arguing about something stupid. I think I'd asked if she wanted to go with me to my brother's for the weekend. That's it. A normal question, soft-voiced, no hidden barbs. She rolled her eyes before I even finished the sentence. You seriously think I want to spend a whole weekend listening to your brother talk about stocks and grilling? She muttered, not even looking up. God, you're so predictable. That was her word lately. Predictable. Said like a curse. So I nodded once, like someone marking a file. Noted. She was wearing the sweater I got her last Christmas, the one she used to say made her feel safe. It hung off her like it didn't belong there anymore. Later that night, when the fight had fizzled into cold silence, I was standing by the kitchen sink, rinsing a glass, when her friend Katie cornered me. I didn't even hear her come in. Just felt the shift in air behind me. I need to tell you something, she said, voice low. And I don't care if she gets mad. I turned off the faucet but didn't dry my hands. Katie had always been the quiet one in their group, loyal, but not blind. She talks about you like you didn't matter, she said. Like you were just convenient. But I've seen her. She was better when she was with you. Softer, more grounded. You're the best thing she had, and she's too proud to admit it. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because if I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure what would come out. Anger? Gratitude? Grief? None of those would have helped. So I just gave her a look, not a grateful one. Not angry either. Just aware. Katie nodded like she understood. And I realized in that moment, someone else had seen it too. The slow erosion. The way affection had turned into performance. The way I had become a prop in someone else's script. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that I'd felt it for months, and did nothing. Until now. I used to think contempt had a temperature. That you'd feel it like heat, anger, shouting, something overt. But that's not how it works. Not really. Contempt is cold, clinical. It's the way someone doesn't listen when you speak, or laughs at your opinions like they're quaint. It's public eye rolls during conversations you didn't know were auditions. It's the way she started introducing me as Ben instead of my partner. Like she wanted to create just enough distance that no one would think I mattered too much. She'd mask it all as jokes. The little digs, the smirks, the one-liners said just loud enough for others to hear. If I ever pushed back, she'd wave it off. Relax, it's just banter. It wasn't. It was rehearsal. Conditioning. Setting the stage for a version of me she could eventually discard without consequence. I remember one dinner with her coworkers. I was telling a story, nothing special, just something about a weird client call, and midway through, she cut in. Oh God, Ben, do you have to tell it like a bedtime story? We'll all be asleep by the punchline. Laughter. Not from everyone, but enough. And she grinned, triumphant, like she'd scored points in a game I didn't know we were playing. I laughed too, quietly. Not because it was funny, but because silence would have made it worse. That's the thing. When someone starts chipping away at you publicly, you learn to plaster over the cracks. Keep it smooth. Keep it civil. She stopped asking my opinion on anything serious months before that. Not just ignoring what I said, discrediting it. If I brought up something real, finances, our future, even weekend plans, she'd talk over me. Pivot. Hijack the conversation like my voice wasn't even in the room. I started logging it mentally. Not to get even. Just to see things clearly. I needed to see it clearly. Not make excuses. Not gaslight myself. She was done long before I was. She just hadn't bothered to tell me. It didn't feel like betrayal. Not yet. Just erosion. Quiet, calculated erosion. But the moment Katie spoke those words in the kitchen, everything clicked into alignment. It wasn't that I was crazy. It was that she'd been quietly planning to distance herself for months, hoping I wouldn't see it. She didn't slip. She practiced. And I'd been standing still while she rehearsed my irrelevance. That was about to change. I didn't go to sleep that night. Not really. I lay next to her and listened to the subtle changes in her breathing, waiting for it to slow into the rhythm of sleep. It took longer than usual. Maybe she sensed something. Or maybe she was scrolling, chatting, recalibrating her narrative already. When she finally settled, I turned onto my back and stared at the ceiling fan slicing the dark. I didn't need disloyalty in the usual sense to feel betrayed. What I had was worse in some ways, willful contempt disguised as companionship. A relationship carefully emptied out until I was the only one left pouring anything in. But it was Katie's words that stayed with me. Not the content, but the tone. She was more grounded when she was with you. There was no flattery in it, no comfort. Just observation. A fact laid bare without apology. And then, you were the one thing she couldn't replace. It sounded almost clinical, like a diagnosis. Like Katie had seen enough to confirm something my instincts had whispered for months, but I'd refused to believe. She wasn't just drifting. She was rewriting. Prepping her story for a post-me version of reality where I was never much of anything. The next morning, I noticed she changed her Instagram profile photo. Just her. No trace of me. Our anniversary post from last year was gone too. So were the vacation shots. Dozens of memories, erased like chalk from a board. Instead, a new post. Just a selfie, filtered, posed, detached. Caption: healing from things I let happen too long. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't understand what it meant, but because I understood exactly what it meant. She wasn't just letting go. She was preparing to blame me for it all. Mutual friends started pulling away that week. Not openly. Just slower replies, skipped invites, sudden busyness. I could feel the distance growing like frost on glass. Subtle, creeping, irreversible. Only Katie stayed the same. She sent me a voice memo later that week. Calm. No performance in her tone. I don't know what she's telling people, she said. But I just want you to know. I see what's really happening. And I'm not co-signing it. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't appreciate it, but because I was starting to learn. Silence is a weapon too. And used properly, it cuts cleaner than anything she ever said. By the following weekend, she'd turned full curator. Carefully crafted captions, vague hashtags about boundaries and recovery. No mention of me. No photos of me. As if I'd never occupied space beside her at all. She wasn't just moving on. She was preemptively rewriting. Reframing what we were into something disposable. Another thing she outgrew. I watched it unfold, not with rage, but with the cold detachment of someone watching a slow demolition from the outside. I didn't ask questions, didn't push back. I kept my profile untouched. No cryptic posts, no retractions, just still, unmoved. But that stillness made some people nervous. One of our mutual friends messaged me late at night. A quick, cautious ping. Hey, just wanted to check in. I don't know what's going on between you two, but she's making it sound like you were the problem. That you made her feel small or ignored or whatever. That word, whatever, hung in the message like an escape hatch. I didn't answer. I knew better than to chase shadows in group chats. She wanted the upper hand not by being right, but by being loud enough first. But not everyone was on board with her version. At a group dinner a few nights later, a gathering we were both invited to, scheduled back when we still operated as a unit, someone cracked the inevitable joke. It was Nate. Always too comfortable, too loud. Well, guess she upgraded after you, huh? He said, grinning toward me while tipping his glass toward her newest Instagram co-star. The table chuckled. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Because Katie, bless her tempered patience, cut through the laughter like a scalpel. You think that guy's an upgrade? She said, her voice sharp, unblinking. She lost the only man who ever showed up for her. Silence fell like a dropped glass. Katie didn't flinch. She just sipped her wine, eyes steady on the center of the table. No rage. No performance. Just truth delivered plainly. My ex, still smiling, still trying to keep control of the moment, froze. She said nothing. Because there was nothing to say. You don't prepare comebacks for people who know your script. And now, the one person who'd once clapped for her lies had chosen not to applaud this time. That moment rewrote something deeper than any caption ever could. Not just for her audience, but for me. She didn't lose me. She bet against me. And lost. I didn't leave the next day. I waited. I needed to see what she'd do after the dinner. Whether she'd confront Katie. Whether she'd spin another angle to salvage what she was losing control of. But she didn't mention it at all. No apology. No explanation. Not even a jab disguised as curiosity. Just a long stretch of silence between us that never got bridged. She came home late 2 nights in a row. Claimed she was at a work event the first time. Just catching up with old friends. The second. I didn't push. I just nodded and kept washing the dishes. My silence must have unnerved her, because she started talking more, filling air with needless updates, strange smiles, and stories I didn't ask for. But it was all noise, nothing sincere. Just static to mask the fact that she'd been caught in a narrative she no longer controlled. That's when I decided. I gave myself 3 more days. Not for her, for me. Time to close the loops, tie up loose ends, make sure that when I left, it would be with clean hands and no regrets. I logged out of our joint streaming accounts, changed the security on my devices, backed up every photo I wanted and deleted the rest. I didn't erase her, I just freed myself from her reach. I boxed my things methodically, essentials first, then the sentimental. I packed like someone preparing for clarity, not escape. She didn't notice. Or if she did, she said nothing. On the 4th morning, I left the apartment key on the kitchen counter. No note, no dramatic statement. Just steel and silence. She wasn't home. That made it easier. I didn't want a confrontation. I didn't need a final scene. What I wanted, what I chose, was something she couldn't control or reframe. Absence. I didn't block her. I didn't post anything. I simply stepped out of the frame she'd been painting. And just like that, the version of me she'd been preparing to discard vanished, before she could finish the last line of her story. Let her explain that. She tried to get ahead of it. By that evening, the curated performance began. Cryptic story posts. A vague photo of an empty closet with the caption, "Some people can't handle truth." No names. No direct accusations. Just enough to invite speculation. But not everyone bought it. Especially not Katie. What I didn't know until later was that Katie had already started pulling away from her weeks before the dinner. Not out of loyalty to me, but out of fatigue. She'd watched my ex unravel the truth so many times she no longer recognized what honesty sounded like. The real break came in private, during a smaller gathering that I wasn't at, and didn't want to be. Someone had asked, "Did he really just leave? Like that?" My ex had laughed, sharp and defensive. "Please! He couldn't handle how honest I was. He needed someone to coddle his ego." That's when Katie stood up. "Stop," she said, voice low but firm. "You don't get to do that. You can't make yourself the hero and the one who was wrong. You pushed him away every day. You made him feel small in public, ignored him in private, then acted shocked when he finally walked." Silence. Katie didn't wait for a reply. She grabbed her coat and left. The story found its way to me in fragments. Not from Katie, she never bragged, but from one of the fence-sitters, someone who'd started realizing neutrality wasn't an option anymore. "She really lost something," they told me, voice cautious. "Not just you. Her credibility. It wasn't about winning. I didn't feel victorious, just still." And then the messages started coming in, quietly, one by one, from people I hadn't heard from in weeks. "Didn't know the full story, man. Sorry. You handled it better than I would've. Didn't realize how much she was twisting it." I didn't answer most of them. Not out of pride, but because I'd stopped needing validation. The silence I left behind was loud enough. And more than that, it was honest. The truth doesn't need a press release. Just time. And she was now stuck living in the shadow of what she threw away, while I was learning how to live outside of it. Weeks passed. She didn't reach out. Not to apologize, not to ask questions. Just silence. But silence doesn't always mean peace. I could see her efforts unfolding like a blueprint I knew by heart. Mutuals told me, without asking permission to, how she kept trying to casually explain the breakup like it had been a mutual drift, a timing issue. "He wasn't emotionally available," she supposedly said once, while nursing a drink at someone's rooftop gathering. The irony of that nearly made me laugh. I wasn't available? I'd been there, through job losses, late-night spirals, her mother's surgery, every unpredictable turn. I'd been steady, present, inconveniently reliable. But I never corrected her narrative. Not once. Because I'd already told the truth, the only way that mattered, by leaving. The people who needed to know had already seen it unfold. Not because I told them, but because they were paying attention when she wasn't. Katie especially. She didn't just stay neutral. She became something else entirely, unshakably honest. Not loud, Not cruel. Just unwilling to lie by omission. And it made a difference. When my ex tried to rally certain friends to unfollow the energy that drained her, Katie stayed firm. She's trying to make it look like she outgrew him, one person said to me privately. But it looks more like she lost something she thought would always be there. Another message came a few days later. She's quieter now. Not sad exactly. Just different. Like someone who knows they went too far and can't take it back. I didn't respond. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel victorious. But I did feel something rare peace. The kind you only earn after walking through fire and choosing not to burn anything down on your way out. I didn't want her broken. I just wanted her to understand. And now she was. Not because anyone screamed at her. Because the absence I left behind echoed louder than any closing door. My place was quiet. Not in a lonely way. In a clean way. Like the silence you hear in the morning before a storm breaks. But in reverse. Like the tension had already passed and all that was left was stillness. I didn't fill the silence. No new furniture. No impulsive trips. No posts pretending I was thriving. I wasn't chasing peace. I was building it. Slowly. Deliberately. There were still moments. Brief ones. Flashbacks. She used to hum while folding laundry. I'd catch myself expecting that sound when I opened the dryer. She used to fall asleep facing the door. Like she was always ready to leave before I did. Little things. Ghosts in motion. But they didn't pull me back. They reminded me why I left. One afternoon, I ran into someone from that old circle. Someone I didn't know well, but who'd watched the whole thing unfold from the sidelines. They offered the standard small talk. But just as we were parting ways, they paused. You know, they said, almost like it cost them to admit it. I didn't get it at first. But now, I think you were the only one honest about how bad it got. I nodded. That was enough. Because I hadn't tried to convince anyone. I hadn't started a whisper campaign or dropped screenshots into group chats. I hadn't aired grievances like they were invitations for sympathy. I just walked. And in doing so, I'd become the one thing she couldn't distort. Because I never gave her the ending she could use. No door slamming. No shouting. No bitter words that could be reframed later. Just keys on the counter. An empty drawer. A blank space where I used to stand. And now she had to live with the fact that the one man who stayed when he didn't have to, also left when she thought he wouldn't. No one argues with a closed door. They just stare at it, and wonder why they didn't stop it from closing sooner. It didn't unravel all at once. At first, she doubled down. More posts, more slogans. Things about learning to love herself, rising from silence. The kind of phrases meant to turn pain into performance. Her feed became a carousel of self-celebration, curated so tightly it felt more desperate than empowering. But then the likes started thinning. The comments quieted. People weren't reacting anymore, not like before. Because somewhere between her trying to turn the breakup into a brand and losing the one friend who used to echo her truths, the story stopped landing. One person told me, she's not fooling anyone. She's posting like she's moved on, but she looks like she's trying to convince herself more than anyone else. And then, a shift. The next time she appeared at a group hangout, I heard she came alone. No new boyfriend, no entourage, just her, and a version of silence she hadn't worn before. Katie was there. I wasn't, but someone recounted it to me with quiet amazement. She sat through a whole evening without bringing you up once, but it was obvious. You were the ghost in the room. Another said she seemed distant, like someone trying to laugh at jokes she didn't really hear. She wasn't crumbling. She was processing. Finally. That's when it clicked for me. She wasn't evil. She wasn't a villain. She was just someone who didn't realize the value of what she had until it was unarguably gone. And me? I wasn't angry anymore. Because I'd stopped living in the version of me she abandoned. I'd become someone she could no longer reach. Not because I held a grudge, but because I outgrew the part of myself that tolerated being chipped away in silence. No one said it out loud, but it became quietly understood. She hadn't just lost a partner. She'd lost the one person who'd seen all her cracks and still stayed. Until staying became the most self-destructive thing I could do. She passed me once. A month after everything, maybe more, I saw her outside a small cafe near where we used to go on weekends. She was alone, holding her phone but not looking at it, just staring into nothing, eyes locked on something internal. She didn't see me at first. I could have kept walking. But something in me said don't. Not to provoke, not to reconnect. Just to know. Our eyes met. It wasn't dramatic. No sharp inhale. No slow-motion flashback. Just two people who used to know each other down to the way they breathed, now separated by a silence that meant more than any conversation could. She gave a small nod, acknowledgement, maybe habit. I nodded back, and kept walking. There was no tension, no guilt, no need to explain, because the explanations had already played out in the quiet hours, in the rooms we no longer shared, in the spaces where we used to talk but had stopped listening. I didn't wonder what she was thinking, because I already knew. She knew she'd gone too far. Not in one explosive moment, but in 1,000 quiet decisions that slowly turned me into a background actor in my own relationship. And now, with Katie no longer backing her story, with friends no longer filling in the blanks with benefit of the doubt, she had to sit with it on her own. No applause, no narrative to spin, just the weight of what she'd dismantled for the illusion of control. I walked 2 blocks before I let myself feel anything. Not grief, not regret. Just a strange kind of calm. The kind you only get when you've survived something that should have broken you, and come out quieter, stronger, and harder to misplace. I didn't hate her, but I would never let her close again. That part of me? Gone. And I didn't mourn it. I honored it. It was Katie who told me later, without malice, without any intent beyond truth. She doesn't talk about you anymore. Not to anyone. I didn't ask for elaboration. I didn't need to. Because when someone stops rewriting the past, it's not always because they've found peace. Sometimes it's because they've realized their version won't hold, and the quiet becomes a kind of confession. She couldn't bring me up without confronting the weight of what she lost. Not because I was perfect, but because I stayed long after the signs told me to go. I offered patience when she offered contempt. I gave dignity when she handed me dismissal. Katie never picked sides out of friendship. She picked truth over comfort. And that made all the difference. It also made the fallout permanent. Because while my ex thought she was winning the story, she hadn't noticed the people who stopped clapping. The ones who pulled away, not with drama, but with clarity. They didn't confront her. They just drifted. Silently. Intentionally. She kept her audience. But she lost the respect. She once said I was just another mistake. But the ones who watched, really watched, saw the contradiction. If I'd been just another mistake, she wouldn't still flinch when my name came up. She wouldn't avoid restaurants we used to visit. She wouldn't freeze when someone mentioned Katie and I in the same sentence. Because silence may not scream, but it echoes. And now she's living inside that echo. While I walk in peace. Not perfectly healed, but finally free.